We got to talk about what I have called on the air as the Muslim rape war against Britain.
It just makes perfect sense to me in many ways. If you know anything about Muslim countries and how they see non-Muslim women, especially Pakistan. I write about the persecution of Christians throughout the Islamic world, and every single week, the several stories come out of Pakistan and other Muslim countries of how they just prey on the Christian women, forcibly convert them, gang rape them, and then the judges and the police side with the Muslims.
What does Britain need to do to begin to turn this around? Hey, friends, we have a special treat for you today. We're doing a video interview with Raymond Ibrahim, a very distinguished scholar and author. He's very well up to date on what's going on with Islam and the West and the history of Islam and the West, a history that a lot of people, I think, would prefer to sweep under the rug. I've interviewed him many times. I've read a lot of his work, and I'm happy to be on video with him again. Raymond Ibrahim, welcome back to the Catholic Current.
Hi, Father McTeigue. Great to be with you again.
Raymond, I want to give our listeners a bit of a warning here. We're going to be talking about a mature and painful topic. Listener discretion is advised. And if you're listening with young ears in your company, you might want to wait till later. We've got to talk about what I have called on the air as the Muslim rape war against Britain. I've read the recent report that came out from a member of parliament detailing horrifying sexual abuse of young British girls, primarily because they were Christian and white, for at least 50 years. There's at least 250,000 well identified victims. The numbers are almost certainly worse. I've talked about this on the air. I've written about it. I'm appalled. I'm shaken by it. You've looked at it too. What's your initial thoughts on the report?
Well, much like you just characterized it, it's on the one hand, it's extremely shocking that it went on. It's actually I think the first date of a recorded Pakistani slash Muslim grooming gang, as they called it, goes to 1955. So we're talking almost
Mm,
80 years. Um,
mm,
the 55 record mark or 60-year mark, that's when it was like already an epidemic. Okay, but it
mhm.
really traces far back, and it just makes perfect sense to me in many ways. If you know anything about Muslim countries and how they see non-Muslim women, especially Pakistan, this is par for the course. I write about the persecution of Christians throughout the Islamic world, and every single week, the several stories come out of Pakistan and other Muslim countries of how they just prey on the Christian women, forcibly convert them, gang rape them, and then the judges and the police side with the Muslims, and Muslims say things like, literally quote, I have verbatim quotes about how Christian women are there just for sex. So you bring that sort of mentality and you transplant it into the Western world, which is all, and the women there are already sort of taught to be promiscuous. What do you think is going to happen? It's exactly what we're seeing. It's what happens in Pakistan, but times 10, because it's being facilitated here in the West itself. So none of this is shocking. It's exactly what one would expect would happen.
No, I'm sure you've heard too that this wasn't really real Islam, and that it's part of a much larger and more complex issue, and that it would be racist or some sort of phobia to speak of this as primarily a Muslim or Pakistani thing in Britain. Maybe we can have a conversation another time about other countries like Sweden and France and Italy and Germany and so on. But I do have in hand a copy of a report issued in 2014 from the Muslim Council of Britain, and it was a symposium on safeguarding everybody's children. And I want to read a line to you from the Secretary General at the time. And he says, as a representative body, uh, it was our responsibility to set the record straight. It was not about apologizing on behalf of the community, but to clearly state that nothing in our faith or culture condones such despicable activities, just as there is nothing in the Christian faith that condones the child abuse revealed in the case of celebrities like Jimmy Savile or politicians like Cyril Smith. And then he adds, Islam's zero tolerance on sexual abuse is clear. What's your response to that? You know Islam, you know the historical records, you follow this every day. You tell me, what do you make of that report?
Well, there's three ways to respond to what he said. We can look at what Islam does doctrinally, what it teaches. We can see how Islam behavior has manifested itself historically, and we can see
Mhm.
how it is going on today throughout the world, not just Britain.
Okay.
In which case, Britain's not an aberration because they're trying to
Mhm.
make, I think, that argument. So doctrinally, humanity's classified according to if they're believers or not, if they're Muslims or not. And if you're a kafir, there's different names in Arabic, kafir, mushrik, etc. You are an enemy by default, and you need to be
You're
subjugated
you're
to
you're an
one.
infidel.
You're an infidel. Yeah, that's the common translation in English. But actually, the Arabic word carries so many worse pejoratives and connotations than the word infidel in English. It literally, I mean,
Mhm.
for an Arab, for a Muslim to hear the word kafir or its other or other words, mushrik, they're all the same. It's basically means this person's your enemy, and you have to hate them, and you have to suppress and subjugate them somehow. And it's really, they do a disservice in the Quran translations, English translations, because they just translate that word into a disbeliever or a non-believer, and it sounds
Mhm.
organic and neutral. It's not. It means an enemy that you have to war against. Okay, so that's the first point, is that every non-Muslim from a strictly Islamic point of view is an enemy. Okay, and that needs to,
Mhm.
the Quran talks about hating them, subjugating them, all sorts of things that are bad, and waging jihad, of course. And then, in the context of that, you can enslave for sexual purposes women. This is in the Quran. Muhammad did it. All the early pious Muslim leaders and caliphs and sultans throughout history did it. Sex slavery was a standard norm up until, I think, until the 70s. Saudi Arabia was doing it until it was forcibly stopped. Okay, and all throughout the Islamic world, it was stopped. Slavery, including concubinage, thanks to colonial pressure in the 19th century and the 20th century. Okay, so it's part of the doctrine. I think Quran 4:3 is one of the many verses that talks about a man can have four wives or can sleep with four wives and as many and whatever his right hand possesses, and that's known as a non-Muslim infidel woman who's been
Mhm.
captured in the context of jihad. Okay, so
Mhm.
historically, very very common, absolutely common, the slavery, and especially, and I've covered this a lot, slavery of white women, European women. There was apparently a premium on them. And this even goes back to Muhammad himself, where in a hadith, and I've quoted it several times, he tries to entice and beguile his followers to wage war on the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines at the time. And he says, "Don't you want the women of yellow?" Okay, which is
Okay.
a linguistic curiosity, but a lot of people think it means fair hair, fair skin.
Mhm.
And that goes all the way throughout history, the Abbasid Caliphate, the entire Viking phenomenon, and it's, the attacks on coastal European nations was one of the main reasons, was to get white slaves and sell it to the Abbasids, who again paid top dollar for them. And this just goes on all throughout history. The Barbary War, the Barbary slave trade of millions of Europeans that went all the way to Iceland, again,
Mhm.
sexually enslaved, etc. So that's the history, that's the doctrine. And then you fast forward to today. Well, you're bringing this very same mentality and you're putting it in. And now it's much worse because now, again, it's such a bad cultural combination because in the West, you have promiscuity, free love, and all that sort of thing. And Muslims, there's also been a stereotype amongst Muslims that goes all the way back to Abbasid times, where they say that it's kind of like this weird fantasy that European women are promiscuous by nature, and for that reason they should be raped. And this comes
Right.
out very frequently. I have it documented in my books like Sword and Scimitar. So you take that mentality and you put it and transplant it in Western nations, and they see women scantily clad walking about, acting promiscuous, and it just all validates it, and that whole entire phenomenon just activates, and they prey on them,
Right.
they groom them, they sexually enslave them, they. It's also interesting because you read the report, and I did too. When you look at the early, I was telling you how there's a sort of degrading mentality. They say all Western women, even nuns, are by nature harlots who are just
Mhm.
promiscuous. This comes out all throughout the report, where the Muslims, really, the way they talk about these girls, in very dehumanizing language. They call
Right.
them you're an animal, you just exist for sex, etc., etc.
Mhm.
So this has a very long history, and so when I see it, all I see is absolute and perfect continuity with the doctrine, with the history. And it's important to note also, because a lot of people are saying, well, maybe this is a Pakistani thing, and I even early on said this is very prevalent in Pakistan with Christians. But it's interesting because if you leave Britain, what you see in Britain, of course, is it has a large Muslim population, but the majority are Pakistanis and Indians, Bangladeshis.
Mhm.
If you go to other countries in Europe that are having the same problem, like Sweden, it's not Pakistanis because there's not a lot of Pakistanis. It's actually
Right.
Arabs and Syrians. And you go in other European countries and you find it's again others. It's not Pakistani. So it's very clearly an Islamic thing. And
Mhm.
but as you indicated earlier, people are too terrified of the racist suggestion, or this is Islamophobic to even touch on this. So they're more than happy to sacrifice a quarter million girls rather than be called
Right.
names.
You see, the racist name, I don't understand because, Islam is not a race,
Mhm.
you know? It's a religion, it's a political ideology, it's not a race, so that confuses me as well. So, the bottom line, that 2014 report from the Muslim Council of Britain, when they talk about the zero tolerance of sexual abuse in Islam, in your view, to summarize, the record shows that's simply not true. Is that
It's
correct?
absolutely not true. This is it's if the Prophet of Islam, who is extolled as the most perfect and complete man, and you have an example, that's what the Quran says, in the Prophet
Mhm,
Muhammad had sex slaves. Uh,
mhm,
there's even one anecdote, I forget her name, but he killed, he took one woman from her husband and her father and tortured her father and husband to death, or had them tortured to death.
mhm,
And this woman, at one point, she even says, "I hated this man more than anyone else," and this is his quote unquote wife, right?
mhm.
But that above and beyond wives, he had concubines, formal sexual slaves.
Right,
And again, it's
right,
all throughout the Quran. Virtually every caliph and sultan, especially in the Ottomans, in Cordoba, in Spain, um, especially as the years went by, they were almost entirely non-Arab, and they were purely
right.
Spaniard or Greek in the Ottomans,
Mhm.
because every single mom was a sex slave, a European sex slave.
Right, right,
And
right.
so it kept diluting and diluting. So the last Umayyad caliph was something like 0.01% Arab.
Now, it also strains credulity to me. I mean, England is a relatively small country geographically. I mean, it's not Canada. So the idea that hundreds of thousands of girls could have been abused over 50, 60 years, did nobody in the Muslim community know?
Well,
Were all the imams taken
mm,
by surprise? All the Muslims in law enforcement, higher education, mental health, medical services, none of them knew? Is
well,
this what we're being asked to believe?
one of the absolute worst places is London and the adjoining vicinities that this was happening. And of course, the mayor there, Sadiq Khan, who's Pakistani, when this was brought up over the years, he would mock it and dismiss it. Okay. And now we know the extent of it and just how well documented and how real this is. This is
Mhm.
something, it was kind of like the dirty secret that everybody knows. Everybody
Right.
knows it. And he acted like, no, no, what are you talking about? And until finally, we got this very
Mhm.
comprehensive report. And he's still, of course, in denial. No, this has nothing to do with, oh, these are just bad actors. And, and you can't castigate an entire religion, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, again, like I said, if you leave the current context and you just look at the Islamic world today, it's happening.
Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
slavery is back big time in Africa, especially
Yes.
sex slavery. And who's doing it? It's
Yes.
Muslims. Okay,
Right.
so this is an Islamic thing. It only ever stopped because back when Western European Christian powers still had a spine in the colonial era, they actually exerted pressure and forced
Okay.
the Islamic world to stop it. Now,
Right.
as the West withdraws in all ways, you're seeing it
Yes.
come back. It's coming back all around the world, and it's coming back even in the West.
Right, right. Now, I wanna shift a little bit and talk about, the people who turned a blind eye. I know in the secular West, the very, very worst thing you can be called is racist, and then maybe 2nd or 3rd would be to be an Islamophobe or any other kind of phobe. I think it's actually wise and prudent to be afraid of things that can really hurt you. So, again, looking at the report, law enforcement, medicine, mental health, education was not only just a blind eye, but oftentimes facilitated as well. What happened in the West? What happened in former Christendom that you could spend an entire career, 20, 30 years in law enforcement or medicine and education, and know that minor girls were being preyed on by gangs of men, and not only do nothing, but vilify the victims and those who tried to defend them, and then also teach your colleagues, those whom you're mentoring, to do the same. What died in the Western soul that this could happen for so long?
Well, I mean, there's many ways to try to unpack this, but to be succinct, it's just a turning away from God, reason, logic, and truth, and just an
Yeah.
embracement of nihilism. And
Mhm.
all I care about is how I look, and that I don't get called the bad name, I don't get called racist, and that my job goes smoothly. And it's selfishness, and who cares about these people as long as we're all in cahoots. And then there's another element that I didn't see it in the report, maybe it was, but that I always wonder, which is okay. Well, Britain has a large Muslim population, large Pakistani population. A lot of them are in positions of power. So, to what
Mhm.
extent were the turning of the blind eye and the police who act this way and the authorities? To what extent were they actually Muslims and Pakistanis who were actually facilitating it, or at the very least trying not to be embarrassed about it and trying to suppress it? So
Right.
you probably had a lot of that going on. You probably had a lot of native whites who were just freaked out and too terrified of touching this because of how they'll look bad. And like I said, it's much
Mhm.
better to just sacrifice these girls. Who cares about them? I have a
Right.
career. So that's the civilization that the West is now. It's not. It's not. It has no honor. It has no self
Mhm.
respect, including for its own daughters. It's happy to just sell them, sacrifice them for its own gain and reputation.
I have a dear I lived in London for 2 years to study many years ago, and I have a dear friend there who is originally Welsh, lived in London for many years, and has since relocated to a small island off of Scotland because he said London has become unlivable. And he says, "Father, you're an American. You're underestimating the role of the class system in Britain. Nearly all of these girls were from
Mhm.
working class, from poor. These were not Oxbridge
Yeah.
graduates. These were not the daughters and granddaughters of nobility. So they were expendable, and I find that horrifying. And also, isn't it the case now, it was maybe, say, different in the '70s, but certainly now, Muslims in Britain tend to vote in blocks, and they tend to vote for the Labour Party. Did Labour Party make a calculation that to have a reliable Muslim voting bloc was worth the sacrifice?
I have no doubt that that's the way their brain would work. Absolutely. Um, and the voting block thing is another interesting point. It just shows you what a clash you have there of civilizations, where Brits are conditioned. Never. If I tell you, oh, I vote for this guy because he's my skin color and my religion, that's considered horrible, right? Imagine if whites
Yeah,
said, I only vote for the white guy. Well, that's Hitlerian. But that's what all the Muslims do in Britain openly. And they say it. Oh,
right,
we're voting for the Muslim guy because he has my back. He's got what's good for me, not what's good for society and for all of us. And it's so open. And like you said, of course, labor and these other groups are just trying to curry Muslim favor, and they're expendable as well when the time
mhm,
comes. They'll these leftist elements always go out of their way to curry favor with Muslims and try to win them over and be their servants until they're no longer needed, and they're also dispensed with as well. So overall, though, really the climate in countries like Britain is just to me surreal, and it's only because
mhm,
people are so used to it. They're born into it. This is all they know. If you could like objectively just transcend it and just look at it as a nation, it's beyond. It's surreal doesn't do it justice. Okay, a
right,
nation that was once so powerful and glorious, and now it's bringing in an element that's raping its children, and it does nothing but sit around and watch and complain and go put
right.
a hashtag. I mean, it's just completely done. I don't see any. I honestly see no hope for it, to be perfectly blunt with you. And I know they have a lot of, oh, this party, that party. No, this has been one slow degradation, and I think it's just going to continue.
Well, I'm afraid you're right because along the way there was a horrifying case last fall of a white college student being stabbed, I believe, by a Sikh,
Mhm.
and the police arrested the young white man bleeding out. There was another video case recently, just a few days ago, I believed, where a number of, how should we call them, cultural enrichers were beating the bejabbers out of a young white boy. And then the police grabbed him, and he thought the police were assaulting him, so he pushed back. So he got arrested, and the police asked everyone not to spread the video around. So it seems that police and institutions are being trained
Mhm.
to facilitate this kind of abuse. In the report that I read from Parliament, the complaining mother said to the school, "I think the abusing men were Asian," and the teacher said, "Don't call them Asian. That's racist. You should just be glad that your daughter is learning about." Another culture. I want to talk about the voting thing for just a moment. I voted recently, last month in the United States, and the polling places are clearly demarcated, and absolutely no one is allowed within hundreds of feet to pass out literature, make a speech, influence the voter in any way. But apparently in Britain there's something called family voting, where Muslim men will bring in a wife or two or three, and in the polling place instruct them how to vote. Now, I don't know if that's illegal in Britain or not. I don't think it's a gold star in the British voting system. But if that happened with a white family, even if a white man brought only if a native Briton only brought just one wife with him and in full Christian modesty, surely he would be arrested or vilified, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. This is again the problem. The Western society, especially secular civic society, has become so very delicate, but it's something that you have to be a delicate person to actually do it. But then you bring an element that just exploits the heck out of it, okay, and just
Right,
for its own gain, and you have to sit back and watch it and do nothing because again you're crippled by these words, racist
right,
or Islamophobe or whatever, okay. And like you said, that young man, I think Henry Nowak, yeah, he was. It was much worse to the police that he might have said something, okay, out of his
right,
mouth than the fact that he was stabbed. Okay.
right,
That's the culture now of that's governing Britain. Okay. That is insane. That
right.
it's become like a sacrament to them, these words, racism,
Mhm.
multiculturalism.
They're magic words,
Yeah.
and if you say the magic words, everything is excused or forgiven. Now, I said some of my best friends are British. I've lived there as an American. I trace the roots of America to Britain. And it's part of Western civilization. It's part of Christendom. Britain used to be so Catholic; it was referred to as Our Lady's dowry. I'd like to see Britain turn around and put a stop to this and reclaim its Christian identity. But now the king, who used to be known as defender of the faith, says that he's defender of faith, unspecified, and is just wants to make a safe place for multiculturalism. What does Britain need to do to begin to turn this around?
In a word, repent. Metanoe
Okay.
in the
Yeah,
Greek
yeah,
term,
yeah,
have
yeah.
a change of mind. That's what the word literally
Mhm.
means. A complete change of mind and a change of gear, and get back to sanity and being normal and objective and rational.
Right,
That's what they need to do. All of which, in my mind, is becoming Christian again. Actually,
right,
that's one with it. And yeah, the point about the king, that just seals it right there. The king, the
right,
monarchy, was so interwovenly connected with Christianity, and he goes, from defender of the faith to defender of the faiths, plural. Yeah, he says
right.
he's the protector of faith in the multi-faith nation. Well, if a once a faith becomes plural, then or to put it simply, okay, if all faiths are equal, then no faith is true. and that's really what he's saying now. It
Right.
made sense when he was a defender of the faith. You can be a defender of the faith in Britain, Christianity, and allow people to have whatever faith they want. That's
Mhm.
one thing.
Mhm.
But if you're defending all the faiths, then you are implicitly saying they are all equal. And if they're all equal, then none of them are true because
Right.
they all contradict each other to one degree or
Right.
another, especially Islam. So,
Sure,
and
of
we all
course.
know he made this change, especially for Islam. Islam is the one religion that condemns the gospel message that says
Right.
Jesus is not the Son of God. He was not crucified. He wasn't killed, and he wasn't resurrected. And you bring that in, and now you're going to defend it equally with Christianity. Yeah, I don't think so. I think actually this is another example of how Britain it will again become a defender of the faith. It just won't be Christianity. It'll be something else. It'll be Islam.
Well, I have to wonder too how well informed His Majesty is about how the religion of peace treats homosexuals, for example. So, but that's another topic for another time. I know that outgoing Prime Minister Keir Starmer, when he worked for Crown Prosecution, so basically he was kind of an attorney general, he sent as many as 13,000 strongly worded letters to men who had been arrested for raping British girls, and he very sternly asks them not to do it again. And he's the prime minister, and his likely successor apparently has absolutely no interest in doing anything in terms of immigration. We've only got about 5 minutes left. Can we talk about immigration policy and the present crisis of Britain? I would say they're not unrelated. What do you say?
Well, of course, not related. If you look at it again, all these problems, all you have to do is look at another European country that shares similar dynamics with, let's say, Britain, and but it doesn't have the migrants and the Muslims, and you're going to find none of this is happening. Okay,
Like
I was in Hungary for
Poland, for
a
example, or
while.
Hungary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Hungary and Poland, they are against having Muslim migrants. These issues are not happening. There is no rape gangs going on. But then I look at other countries that do have a large Muslim population, and I see the same dynamic. Sweden, Germany. Remember in Germany a few years ago, there was that rape festival on New Year's Eve in Cologne, uh,
right, yeah,
where Muslims were okay, and all throughout. So wherever you have this large Muslim populations in Europe, it's the same exact phenomenon is occurring. So how can we see it in the doctrine, see it in the history, see it in the Islamic world, what's happening to Christians and other non-Muslim minorities, and then see it in the West and still plug our ears and say, no, no, it's not what you think it is. That's the
right,
problem. So when you ask me what needs to change, that you need to stop
right.
being stupid.
Well, yes, and I think part of not being stupid is to have we need to have a cultural come to Jesus moment, quite literally. Christianity says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. It doesn't say you have no enemies, and it
Mhm.
doesn't say no one is persecuting you. And one of the best ways you can win an enemy over to be a real friend is to convert them to Christ. So I would like to see Christianity reclaim its missionary spirit, because when you have a Christian culture, you don't have a rape culture. And I think that needs to be said up front. Raymond Ibrahim, I am so grateful for your time. I'm so very, very grateful for your good work. Keep on doing what you're doing, and maybe someday we'll have a pleasant conversation. But meanwhile, I'm glad that you're with the Catholic Current today, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Thanks, Father McTeigue.
I'm Jesuit Father Robert McTeigue, your host here every day of the Catholic Current. Join us tomorrow for another topic with a great guest on the Catholic Current, coming to you from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Go in peace, and please do pray for me.